It's an introduction to solar PV, not knowing at all the background of people. So it's going to be broad. And for, I think Davron, who mentioned that he has questions specifically about irradiance and about the, well, I'm guessing solar light intensity. At the end, in the question and answer session, we can take some time for it. Or if you come back for the advanced sessions, we can also take some time dedicated to your questions. At this stage, I'm afraid in the talk it will be broader. We're talking about, as you see here, technologies, market, and policies, and it will be let's say broad audience, meaning that I'm hoping that whatever your background, you will follow. I will start by just giving you the outline and who we are. I would like to ask everyone at this stage to mute yourself, except if you want to ask a question or interrupt or just comment, of course. If else, maybe I will.
Unsi,
yes.
sorry, we can see your notes. If you can put it in actually page.
Yeah. Okay, sure. I was navigating, and now is that?
Yeah.
Better. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. So the plan is we'll discuss why are we talking about solar anyway, and then the technologies, the markets, and so some public policies. Each point will be tackled in a general way, but the idea is that you hear things that you don't hear everywhere. Knowing that we have 1 hour, so I'm going to talk for 1 hour approximately, and then we'll have half an hour question and answer session. So of course we are limited, and we had to make choices. So for example, we're barely tackling the recycling issue that we can discuss about. On the other hand, we're talking about some technological aspects related to efficiency. So we had to make some choices. And in public policies, we're not entering into the legal aspect. We're talking more about what is being done at the moment. And now also I want to give a frame. So we are who we are is IDAMA. It's a social enterprise. We deliver training, we develop training content and educational content for a number of players related to sustainability and sustainable development. The idea is to really work on people, and in order to work in a sustainable way, we work on content, on developing innovative content. Our, let's say, specificity that will not be obvious today because we are in this Zoom and talk context, but usually our specificity is the hands-on and the active aspect. So we always have people do something. So even if we're talking about sustainable urban planning during a simple visit, educational visit to a sustainable neighborhood, we will have the participants to this visit deliver, draw their own urban design. So let's say sustainable city. So we work with a number of players. We do what we call educational tours. That's for schools or for tourists in non-corona context, of course. We work with business support structures. So we deliver, let's say, we help social entrepreneurs think about their projects in a green way. We work a lot with schools, and we deliver consultancy or advice to people who want to change their own place or who want to bring themselves the message to the community, their clients, their employees, etc. So we really develop original content. We, again, is IDAMA. IDAMA is a company based in the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, in Abu Dhabi, and specifically in Masdar City, which is a sustainable, let's say, environment. It's a sustainable neighborhood in the outskirts of Abu Dhabi. We are also in Lebanon, where I am now, and we work mostly with the Middle East. So this talk will, so when I will take examples, those will be from the Middle East context, and specifically the UAE and Lebanon. We work with partners from all the Middle East, and we host people from the whole world. But just to clarify for people who don't know us and who found it who found this talk online, which I'm very happy about, we will focus on the UAE and Lebanon when taking examples. Now, obviously, solar energy is energy, and it has, as such, no local identity. Now, why am I specifically delivering this talk? So I'm a founding, let's say, a founder of IDAMA that was founded 5 years ago, and I'm presently working as I'm presently its CEO. But the reason for which I'm delivering this talk is because I'm a physicist, so a standard academic until 5 years ago. I actually worked in Kiri, as I see that there is somebody from Kiri here. And I've been working on solar energy for more than 10 years. We worked together with my colleague and partner Frederick Dross for some time in IMEC in Belgium. I graduated from EPFL in 2007. I did my PhD there, and then I still have an academic arm, let's say, through Sorbonne University Abu Dhabi, where I teach semiconductor physics applied to solar energy. So this being said, let's talk now about the topic and well, discuss first what's the deal. So why are we talking about solar energy? Why is it so important? And I'll navigate between solar in general and solar photovoltaic for the beginning of this talk, and I will explain why in a bit. Essentially, it's because now the overwhelming majority of solar installations are solar PV or solar photovoltaic. But again, I will say a couple of words about it in a bit. So I also see that there was somebody from the NVGL, a former colleague of Frederick. This comes from the NVGL's outlook. And we see, well, two information. First, that now in 2000, so this is from 2017, but the outlook is not, is relatively correct. Now in the years 2015 to 20, solar is increasing in quantity, in proportion of energy produced rapidly, and that it is expected to take a very large role. Now, role in what? Well, in our energy mix, in the energy production that is used on the planet. Now, this graph is about all the energy used in the planet. Excuse me. This graph is about all the electricity produced in the planet and what are the sources, the sources of electricity produced in the planet. So the idea is that sun-powered electricity is going to take a major role and is already taking one. Now. So how is this translated in numbers that are in narrower periods of time? Well, simply, well, not simply, but here is an interesting fact. So if you see the first 4 lines here, those represent the new installations of electricity production. Okay, the new installations in electricity productions by type of technology. So coal, gas, and are the most important one if you take them individually. But if you take in terms of category, the renewables are presently the most important one. So nowadays, every year, the capacity that is installed is overwhelmingly in majority made of renewable energies. So it is so the expectation from this time it's International Energy Agency is that in the next 20 years it will this trend will go ahead. So solar is important for the very simple reason that it is actually important, right? It's important in the installations, it's important in the yearly installations, it's important in the outlook, and for other reasons that I will list. Now, Side note, for some reason, the predictions of this same International Energy Agency are always conservative. Every year, so those are the prediction of the World Energy Outlook of the International Energy Agency by year of publishing of the World Energy Outlook. Okay, I need someone to tell me if you're hearing and seeing still well, because my computer did a strange reaction. So can anyone, Nadia or Frederic, can you just tell me if everything is still heard and seen?
Back online.
Okay.
You disconnected.
Okay. Did I disconnect for long?
Yeah.
Okay. So
like 1 minute.
Okay. 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 Thank you. Okay. Sorry for this. So I'll just well restart with this slide. So so I was explaining here that the World Energy Outlook that is published by the International Energy Agency every year, every couple of years, gives predictions about what about the shares of each energy type of energy in the coming 10, 20, 30 years. And every time the IEA has published something, they have underestimated the growth of the solar field. And so this
I cannot see the slides anymore.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm the only one, but let me know.
Thanks, Fred. Sorry for this. I haven't changed slide, I have to say, since a while, but okay. So question is, why is and yeah, please interrupt again if something happened. Why is solar systematically exceeding predictions? So is it because of climate change? Climate change is causing a number of crises. One of them is the elevation of sea level. Another of them, well, is climate change, so extreme climatic phenomena. Another of them is desertification, etc. And it's real, right? It's real. So Bangladesh, the densest country on earth, has lost 10% of its surface area and has approximately 10 million climate refugees already today. A number of countries, well, anyway, I'm hoping I don't need to convince you. Something is happening. Climate change is partly due to fossil fuel use, and specifically to electricity. So solar could be a solution. Is that because of that? That's anyway, for sure, a valid reason. Is it because of pollution? So polluting the air because of fossil fuel use is not only causing climate change, it's causing, well, just pollution. And pollution causes early death. Here you have a number of statistics. On the left, the small square, you have the loss of life expectancy in Europe due to air pollution. So in the dark zones, it's more than 1 year. And on the right map, you have the number of deaths per million due to the quality of air. Again, this is everywhere, and this is real. And a large part of air pollution is due to fossil fuel burning, and the large part of fossil fuel burning is due to electricity production. We're mostly producing electricity through fossil fuel, right? We need to boil water, to burn them, to boil water, to then produce electricity. Is it because of climate change in the heat aspect? So the heat is now starting to be felt. I think I haven't spent a couple of weeks in the last 5 years without having this same discussion, saying, oh, climate changed, seasons are hotter than before, those rivers used to be larger before. I'm now in the Lebanese mountains, people say, oh, we used to have snow for a longer period. So it's real, it's happening for real. And again, partly, largely, it's due to fossil fuel burning, which could be replaced by solar energy. Is it because solar could actually, at least on paper, feed the whole world with energy, with electricity and with energy? So a simple calculation that is, of course, not directly applicable, but a simple calculation tells us that there are a lot of that the quantity of solar light that we receive is gigantic and is enough to feed to supply all our needs. This is another way of saying the same. The amount of sun we receive every year is it's by far larger than any other type of energy source we have, be it renewable or non-renewable. Or is it because of all the cartoonists, all the funny theories, all the weird theories that are spreading around? So these are only some examples gathered again by my colleague Fred. I have to say I like a lot the one that is on the bottom right. Rock quality music versus US oil production. US is one of those countries, the United States is one of those countries that passed conventional oil peak production. Now they are into unconventional heavily. So yeah, there's a lot to say, right? There's a lot to say. But in general, solar is simply something that is that has besides all what we showed before, it has a good it rings well. It has a good reputation. People like solar. People love solar. Most of the world citizens consider that we should use as much as possible solar energy. Even besides citizens, large companies, or as a consequence, now it's up to you to understand it, large companies are betting on it. And you see Total, which is an extremely large energy player, and which has more than 150 is a more than $150 billion company, whereas their solar activity is far less than 1% of their revenue. They consider themselves as a major solar player, and they consider solar as a major part of their own activity. Similar to oil here, oil and gas, you see, whereas 99% of their activity is made of oil and gas. And now this is all helped and supported by the fact that, well, it's accessible. Now solar is accessible, right? It's accessible because on the right, what we saw already earlier, well, we have the production that is there and the installation that are happening. And then on the left, you see prices evolutions. It's in dollar per energy unit. That's not very important at this stage, the energy unit. But in dollar per energy unit, the price of energy unit produced by solar energy is now cheaper than the price of an energy unit produced by oil. And the crossing point happened in 2012. See that sentence? I'd put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. So this sentence is actually more than 100 years ago, and it's by at that point a major energy, well, I don't know if he realized that he was going to be such a major energy player, but Thomas Edison, one of the, let's say, fathers of electricity, who said that in 1910. And it does make sense. It does make sense. And I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. Well, he didn't know at that point, but now we even more agree with him, because oil and coal have, when burnt in large quantities, as we're doing now, catastrophic environmental footprint. And I'm not talking only about climate change, but just in general. So that's, let's say, the general context about solar. And again, elements about its growth. It's now a major energy source. In growth, in new installations, it's one of the first, one of the main. And in terms of environmental footprint, well, we didn't focus a lot on this point, as we've within IDAMA, we're talking a lot about environmental footprint and about pollution. So we didn't focus want to focus on that today. But in terms of environmental footprint, it has a relatively positive one. Now, obviously there is one, and we are not talking about having or not having an environmental footprint or a negative impact. We're talking about having an impact that is able to be absorbed by the planet and to allow us to sustain everything here, or that is not allowing that. Now, what are the technologies available for solar energy? So again, here I have focused until now on a specific solar energy, and we'll explain in a minute why. But first, I want to talk about the sun in general. So I could argue that actually all the energy we're using on this planet is solar energy. Okay, even oil and coal are coming from solar energy. So the drawing that you see on the left starts from the sun, carbon dioxide that is in air, and natural plants and trees. Okay, those trees grow thanks to the sun that allows them to do photosynthesis and to take the carbon in the air to become their leaves and their wood and etc. Just some millions of years later, these die. They decompose into they are buried under the sediments, etc., and they become oil, coal, and gas. Oil, coal, and gas. So even those somehow are solar energy, right? And then I would like to add that the wind is a solar energy because the wind is due to contrast in temperature, and those contrasts in temperature on the planet are due to the way the sun is shining on various sides of the planet, and in some sides there are clouds, in some others there are not, in some sides it's oceans, etc. So those sides of the planet absorb light differently and therefore heat up differently and create variations of temperature that create the wind. Water as a source of energy is also due to the sun, because the cycle of water that allows us to use the water's energy is due to water's evaporation. Only to some extent, nuclear, geothermal, and tidal energies don't come from the sun, and those constitute approximately 4% of the energy available today. Now, this being said, this is mostly an experience by the thought. So it's like an FYI. By the way, people, everything comes from the sun. So that means that, for example, when we want to calculate an efficiency and be fair between the various sources of energy, we need to take this into account, right? And so that means, for example, that when I'm talking about oil, oil is a great concentration of energy. There is a reason for which it's called black gold, but realize that it took 100 million years of accumulating sun's energy to become that. And this is why it's non-renewable. It's actually renewable. It just takes 100 million years. Okay, so throughout the ages, human beings found many ways to collect direct sun energy. So from what I said earlier, of course, I'm going to focus on the one that we are receiving now live. I'm not going to talk about the wind, the water, and not about coal and oil. I'm going to talk about the one we're receiving live. It's been thousands of years that the human being is using this type of energy. Here you see the famous mirror that was used to burn some ships, war ships in the ancient Greeks' time. I think it was Archimedes who's depicted here. Somebody can correct me. The ancient Egyptians would use this sunlight to heat up houses through heating elements of the walls of the houses. Sorry, Archimedes is written here. And we are today using essentially partly similar techniques. So on the upper right, you see solar thermal systems that are simply heating water by absorbing sunlight. And this is similar to the image that is just to the left. And then in the bottom middle, you see a concentrated solar power system. That those are mirrors concentrating water, the sunlight on a liquid that is then used, that is evaporated and used to produce electricity through a turbine. And it's similar to the lower bottom left image. And then on the bottom right, you have photovoltaics, and that's, I have to say, a relatively new system, although it's similar to photosynthesis. Now, I'm not saying that we haven't progressed, right, in 3,000 years. I'm saying that the techniques are evolving and sometimes disruptively evolving, but that we are building on our past, right? So as you saw before, there are two ways essentially of using energy. One is through concentrating sunlight on a liquid that heats up. And one is concentrating sunlight on a panel that produces electricity directly. On the left side, you see the quantity of electricity produced, of energy, sorry, produced by heating a liquid. So this is called concentrated solar power. The approximate capacity that is installed today is 6 gigawatts. This is the equivalent of 6 nuclear reactors, or of 6 average mid-sized oil-fueled electricity power plants. On the right, you see the quantity of solar photovoltaic energy installed. Around the same period, we were around 400 gigabytes, so approximately 80 times more, and we are now at 800 gigabytes, which is approximately 120 times more. Now, I don't have the evolution of concentrated solar power for the last years, but it's a relatively linear evolution. So we are approximately at a factor 100. So solar energy on this planet is used by humans, is made roughly of more than 99% of solar photovoltaic energy, which is the reason for which we often focus on that one, and we chose to focus on this one today. It's also a source of energy that is extremely scalable. So you can install it at a person level as well as at the country level. And we'll see that when we'll discuss the policies in a bit. So I just want to clarify the terms. I know some people are extremely familiar and some others are not, but I'll talk about two different terms here. Power and power capacity and electricity production. Power capacity, or sometimes peak power capacity, or just power. This corresponds to the maximum that a power plant, an electricity plant, is able to produce per unit of time. So this corresponds, if you compare electricity to speed, this corresponds more or less in a car to the maximum speed that is reachable. Okay, in the car it's per hour, so here is 240 kilometers per hour. In a power plant it's watts, and the watt is actually energy per second, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, watts or kilowatts or megawatts or gigawatts are equivalent to kilometers per hour. That means that it's a maximum production per unit of time attainable. Now, on the other hand, what is very often of interest to us and what we are invoiced, the way we pay, it's not per capacity, it's per actual consumption or per actual production. You will pay fuel for your car, not according to the maximum speed, but according to the distance you actually crossed. And this distance in a car, it's in kilometers or miles or whatever. For energy, there are many units of energy, but for electricity, it's called a kilowatt hour. It's a unit of electricity consumed. Its consumer price ranges from around 5 cents, $cents, $10, depends where you are and what you are buying exactly, but that's the order of magnitude. 5, let's say, or 1 to $20, around $10, okay? So there is the power capacity, and this is how we measure what is installed on the planet. We'll always say, so for example, Lebanon has approximately 2 gigawatts of diesel-fueled power plants installed. it's not using them all the time. Okay, it doesn't tell us exactly the consumption, but it is the capacity that is present, and that's the maximum that we can produce. It's 2 gigawatts, so that means 2 giga units of energy per second. Okay. The UAE at the same time has around 10 to 12 gigawatt of production. Now the UAE has of capacity. Sorry, the UAE has 2 giga approximately. We'll see that later. Between 1 and 2 gigawatt of solar capacity. Now this is a capacity. It doesn't mean that it's producing this all the time. That's based on the demand, and for solar on the availability of the resource. Okay, so this is a bit more information. So as I've given those definitions, I just want to take like 5 seconds of break and allow you for questions if you are, and just check if anything was written in the chat. We can also say that oil and coal are renewables, but not in the humanity timescale. Well, absolutely. And definitely, they are actually renewable, but just at 100 million years of period, which is quite a long period, right? Yes, Corinne. Yeah, so that's time for question. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't really get what you mean by electricity production.
You mean in the vocabulary note that I just in the definition that I just said?
Yes, yes. How would this apply to if I have solar panels on my roof?
Okay. So here maybe production I should have completed. So quantity produced. So I'll come back to the slide. If anyone else has a question, maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions and then I respond to everything. And if not. Okay, so I'll go back to that slide. So on your roof, your solar panel have a certain capacity. This capacity is reached first when they are connected, and second when the sun is shining. When they produce with this maximum capacity or with another maximum capacity, they are producing a certain quantity over a certain span of time. So say that they produce during 8 hours, they will produce a certain quantity of electricity that allows you either to be used instantaneously, so you just plug your tools in them. But usually it's not exactly like that. Usually you have a buffer before you as a consumer and the production on your roof. And this buffer can either be the national electricity company, so EDL in Lebanon, or batteries, or both, right? And so this buffer is taking and storing somehow a certain quantity of electricity that then you are able to reuse. And by the way, I can even go further and say that if the solar panels are producing with a certain rate, so let's say they are producing, I don't know, 100 watts. So that means a certain number of energy units per second or per hour. Well, you can store them and then consume them at a different rate, right? So you can produce at a certain speed or rate, then store and then consume at a different speed or rate. That will mean that the time in both production and consumption will not be the same, but the quantity that you have produced is the one that you will consume. So I'm using those 2 terms because really one is a capacity and the other one is a quantity. Another way to see it is that the second one is how much you're filling your battery or your energy stock, and the first one is the rate with which you are filling it, your energy stock. And maybe I should use this image in the future. So the first one is really the flux, the rate with which you are producing or filling your tank, and the second one is the size of the tank or the size of what you consume. So how much you emptied the tank. I hope it's a bit clearer, but then yeah, we can find other images, other pictures. So yeah, so as mentioned, focusing on solar energy, solar photovoltaic energy, and indeed it's mostly what you will put on your roof. Now, side note, specifically around the Mediterranean, but I'm guessing elsewhere as well, there is a lot of small solar insolation to heat up water. Those are not solar photovoltaics. Those are similar to what I was showing earlier, which is solar thermal energy, this one. So this one on the upright, okay? This is simply producing hot water. And usually people put one unit per roof. And it allows them to actually save on fuel, save on electricity. So that's one. And that we won't go into it because there is no very really statistics or widely spread study about them, and it's, I would say, a necessary but small component of the solar energy market nowadays. So coming back to our focus, that solar photovoltaic energy, photo for the light and voltaics for the electricity. Or the volts, okay? It's really direct conversion, and it's the only technique we know today to do a direct conversion from light to electricity. There is the only intermediate is an electron, but an electron is actually what is carrying electricity. So you have light that is being absorbed by those panels on the right. Those panels can also be on the roof, they can be anywhere. And light, when absorbed, is directly transformed into a mobile electron. The light energy is absorbed, so light actually somehow disappears, but as you know that nothing disappears on this planet, at least in our world. So it has to be transformed in something else, and it's actually transformed into movement of the electron. The photon's energy is transformed into electronic movement, and electronic movement is directly electricity. So that's it. Those elements, those panels, or those cells, you see the squares on the panels, are absorbing light and directly transforming it into movement of the electrons that are in those materials. Those materials are mostly silicon of the family of they are semiconductors, and they have properties, optical and electronic properties, that allow for this specificity. To explain it in simpler or non-specific words, using another field of science, they actually use a system that is very similar to photosynthesis. So when light impinges on an object, several things can happen, but essentially light can be reflected, as you see on the upper left drawing, or light can be absorbed, as you see on the second drawing on the left. And when light is absorbed, well, its energy has to be converted to something else, okay? And this something else can be several elements. It can be heat. It can be electricity in our case. So so if you simply are wearing a black element, a black surface, black cloth, what will happen is that light absorbed by the sun will be converted into heat, okay? A black object is warmer than a white object in the sun. Now, a black object is warmer whenever its energy goes into, well, heat. But if this black object is now a photovoltaic object, actually the energy produced by that is coming to the object from the sun is transformed partly, because remember that it goes into the movement of the electrons. So it doesn't go into heat, because again, at every point we are in our real world physics. So the energy has to be conserved. Nothing can disappear. So if part of the energy of the sun energy that is coming on an object is transformed into electricity, well, that's a part that will not be transformed into heat. So PV objects, when black PV objects, are cooler then your pullover or your sweater that is black as well. It's a similar principle in plants. So plants absorb sunlight. Now they are not black, so they don't absorb everything. They absorb everything but the green. So they absorb it and they don't heat up. They use this energy to build their own body, to absorb carbon and build their own molecules. Okay, they transform the extra energy into carbonated molecules. This is photosynthesis. And this is the reason for which, in the same conditions, in the same place, if you stand in the shade of a tree or in the shade of a inanimate, so in the shade of a metallic shade or wooden shade or anything, the shade of the tree will feel cooler, whereas the air temperature is the same. The shade of the tree will feel cooler than the shade of any other type of shade, because a metallic shade will heat up and send part of its heat on you, whereas a tree is not heating up. So this is going a bit more into the detail, which I will not let's say spend a lot of time on it. So here we're just showing roughly, so you see the sun shining on the cells that we had before, but now they are very, very much zoomed. And so when the sun shines, it actually excites or gives energy to the electrons that start moving around, creating an electric field, and then again moving around. As I was saying earlier, the idea here is to give an introduction. To give an introduction first to share in general, because this is a lot of what we do in IDAMA. We share knowledge, but it's also to give an introduction to a potential advanced program. So we also deliver paid programs for which there are exams and and certificates and etc. And so here I'm gonna do from time to time a teaser for this longer program. It's a 3-session of 2 hours program that will start within 2 weeks, so mid-July. And within this program, we'll take a session to discuss really the technicalities of solar energy. We'll discuss the scientific principles. We'll discuss what are the new technologies that are either just now coming on the market or about to come on the market. And we'll discuss what is actually limiting the efficiency of solar cell, and how can we calculate or guess or evaluate the efficiency of the system, and what that means anyway efficiency. This is really for people who want to discuss further, who maybe want to either install on their roof, or who want to have a more advanced knowledge. So I'll do 3 teasers like this, just to let you know what roughly will be the 3 sessions of or what are the 3 sessions of the advanced program. We're obviously open to suggestions or to requests, and this is at the end tailored for the people who will follow them. So this ends the part about technologies, and now I have 2 more parts, one about markets and economics, and one about public policies. So I am actually late on my own timing. I'm sorry for that. So I'm going to try to make this in 10 minutes. And if it's too long, or if you feel that I'm giving details that are unnecessary, please let me know. At the same time, if you have questions, please also let me know. Can I ask anyone to make a sign and just to please to confirm that I'm still online and that people are still hearing me, as I was disconnected for a couple of minutes earlier?
Yeah, you are.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay, so we are talking about the energy fields, right? I mean, it's great to talk about solar photovoltaic energy. It's super interesting. Thank you. It's scientifically at the same time simple and super advanced, but reality is we are on the energy market. And the fact that we took Total as an example earlier, it shows you that very well. And obviously we are on the energy market. That means that it's an ultra competitive market. So solar has not always been, and actually has only very, very, very recently been a competitive source of energy, which means that for a very long time, so the discovery of the origins of the solar, so the at that time, the photoelectric effect was done around 1910 by a team or a school of quantum physicists, well, by Albert Einstein mainly. And it has been used commercially, or let's say industrially, since after the Second World War, so the 50s. The two main markets historically are satellites and gadgets. Satellites, because nobody cares about the price. We just want to have energy without any fuel. And gadgets, because there are not so many ways to carry your own source of energy, right? Now, there is something that we very often forget, but there is actually a very, very, very massively spread product that has been using solar energy for the last 50 years, and this is the calculator. The Casio calculator, I don't know if it was Casio already 40 years ago, it has been using amorphous silicon solar cells forever, with a very, very modest efficiency of 1%, but that was enough. That was enough to make it work, and to load the battery. So Bama is asking me, will the presentation be shared to the participant? Not the presentation, however, we'll put this video. Actually, we'll put it online. Except if I realize afterwards that I said something really weird, but hopefully not. So yeah, you will have access to it, and very welcome. So so those are the two historical markets. Now, with time, with combination of the oil crisis that happened in the 70s, crisis in plural, and then the realization that using fossil fuels is polluting, and that pollution has several consequences, amongst which health consequences and climate-related consequences. So there has been a number of policies, and especially public policies that supported solar in various ways. We'll see that in the next chapter. But they allowed the situation that we have today, which is that solar is actually a market, a sub-market of energy, and it's a very, very active one. It has three main segments, with one fourth one that is a mix of all the others, but that has its own specificities. So one is residential solar, so that's what you would install on your roof, that can be connected to the grid, that can be connected to batteries. The other one and the main one is utility scale projects. So in number of projects, of course, this is small, but in quantity of energy, of capacity, both capacity and actual production, this is gigantic. And this is not completely, but mostly state-driven. And then you have the third market, approximately, yeah, again, 20-25% of the installations. That is the commercial and the industrial. The percentages that you see here are in terms of capacity installed. So we have actually a lot of molds in the whole Middle East. That's becoming more and more a trend. The Middle East is not very rich with personal installations for various reasons that we will see in a bit. But I would say the developed and rich countries in the Middle East have some of the largest utility scale installation on this planet. Because they can, because there is a lot of sun, and because there is a love in this region for having the large projects. Now, a segment that is a mix of the residential and commercial is community solar. So those are projects that are crowd-funded, and this is developing crowdfunding of project, and it is a way of building it. The idea is that a community, now crowdfunding can be delocalized, of course, but in general, it's a local community that is a village, a neighborhood, families, friends, that gather together to build their own installation. So to co-fund the investment of their own installation, knowing very well that the payback time is relatively short and is guaranteed. So very often it's so this is, I'm sorry, this is an example of community solar. So if you are in an apartment, you don't have a roof, if you simply want to mutualize, want to share costs, etc. So you can invest in a specific location that is not too far from yours. It could be actually if it's a pure financial investment, but usually it's not too far from where you are, and you can design it according to your needs, both your energy and financial possibilities and needs. So mini teaser here. In the longer program, we'll discuss not in details because we cannot check the house of every participant, but we'll discuss what are the main rules to design an installation at a house or at a small neighborhood level. Now, as we saw earlier, the global market is dominated by utility scale. So again, here dominated means in terms of energy capacity and actual energy produced, not in number of installations. You know, it's often said that in Germany, the first electricity producer is households, because you have 1 million personal or household installation in Germany, more than 1 million now actually. But of course, they are not one company. It's actually 1 million companies. So, utility scale are now producing 50% of solar electricity on the planet, and it is an installation that needs to be adapted in order to be then connected to the grid. This is roughly the principle. So this, I mean, it's a bit more technological, so I will not go into the detail, but you're producing continuous electricity, DC, direct current electricity with solar, that needs to be stabilized and transformed into alternative current to be then injected into the grid. And this supports the grid. At this stage, to my knowledge, we don't have any grid that is fully, not even local grid, that is fully supported by solar. Maybe some of you might correct me. And then, because then it's going into the traditional grid, and the traditional grid is mostly relying on energy transport. It's extremely rare that energy is produced where it's consumed in the national grids all around the world. So there are transportation. There is a lot of hundreds of kilometers of transmission of electricity, and in order to transmit electricity on long distances, you need to produce high voltage and high quantities. So this is also a reason for which large, so let's say installations that are far away from cities are very often extremely large. Otherwise, it's not worth it. Small installations will always be next to cities because it's not worth it to transport electricity if the installation is large. Now, surprisingly enough, although the sunlight is not very well spread around the world, solar energy is quite well spread around the world. And the reason for this is that actually solar electricity works whether there is a lot of sun or not, where there are clouds or not. The production of electricity is very simply proportional to the quantity of light that is reaching you. So even if it's cloudy, there is still light reaching the panels, much less than when it's sunny, but there is still light. So it's worth mentioning because, for example, for wind energy, it's not the same. If you double the quantity of wind, you multiply the wind-produced electricity by the cube of this doubling, so by 8, right? So actually, when I say that the sun is not so evenly distributed over, sunlight is not so evenly distributed over the planet, it is, however, everywhere. And it is, and solar energy is present everywhere. For wind energy, it's a bit more intermittent or variable. Okay. Now, on the other hand, I was just saying that solar electricity use is distributed evenly around the world. The production is not, or at least not anymore. So China is now dominating the production overwhelmingly, which is causing actually some issues for countries that are still subsidizing solar, because sometimes they feel that they are subsidizing Chinese producer, and this is something that we could discuss later on. Okay, so now, to be fair to China, it's also today the most important consumer of solar energy installations. I've been saying that PV is great, that solar PV is great, that solar PV is spread all around the world, that solar PV is growing. It's the largest number of installations all around, etc. But I also said that the energy market is a super competitive one, and obviously it's not only for environmental reason, or unfortunately it's not only for environmental reasons that solar is now dominating or about to dominate. It's because it actually reached an extremely low price, and this is partly thanks to the subsidy policies that have been around for a while, and that we'll see in a bit, and that, by the way, are being progressively stopped. So we see now some latest large installations. We'll see some more in a bit, and we see the price per megawatt hour. Now, this might not speak a lot to a lot of you. We actually pay on our electricity bill a kilowatt hour. So you have to divide by 1,000 to compare, and I'll give you in a minute a comparison. In the Middle East, where electricity is mostly subsidized, a kilowatt hour costs between 5 and let's say 10 cents per kilowatt hour. This is a subsidized price of electricity. Here we are talking about less than 3 cents per kilowatt hour at the production cost, and this is not subsidized, of course. To give another comparison, in Lebanon, a lot of people buy their electricity from local generators. Local generators are selling electricity at approximately 30 cents per kilowatt hours. And this is to be profitable. But that means also that their cost is around 20 cents per kilowatt hours. Here we're talking about 3, so 6 times less. And you see the evolution. So on the horizontal axis you have time, and the yellow axis is the price of electricity produced by natural gas. And the black circles are solar installations and their respective costs. Each installation has its own cost because it has, it comes at a point in time. So the module itself has a given, the object itself has a given, is sold at a given price. And then it has a certain production, depending on the sun, depending on the location, depending on the size, there's a scaling effect, etc. So you see that the crossing point is around, let's say, 2011, 2012. Okay, in the advanced session, for those interested to go further, we'll see really in detail how is this cost, where does this cost come from, and how is it profitable? Like, how long does it need to give back the energy that it produced and the money that was invested? Okay, I'll take. So I was not up to my challenge of taking 10 minutes. I will just take 10 seconds of break now to see the chat and to let you time to ask questions and breathe. I've read about one island. Okay, well, I would like to advise everyone to read the chat. I can read it for those who are not on an easily accessible screen. So I've read about one island that pumps water into a lake in elevation during the day and then uses the water flow during the night, thus supplying electricity continuously. Frederick responding, this is known as pumped hydro. It's considered an electric storage technology. It's the largest source of electricity storage. So, well, you said it all, guys. Indeed, it is, besides batteries, it is a way to fill a dam. Like you could use electricity production at noon, where maybe there is a lot of solar electricity produced, but not all of it is actually used. And instead of charging batteries, which we know are quite expensive, I mean, they are getting cheaper day by day, but they are still expensive, especially in large quantities. You could use a dam to fill to store the energy. Now we still have issues in how efficient this storage is. So this is why it's not more widespread. But I want to give you an anecdote. France is using mostly nuclear electricity production. Nuclear electricity production has a very, very, very bad flexibility. So they have to produce almost all the time the same quantity. So at some point, they produce far more than what they need. And instead of wasting it, they sell it at a very low price to neighboring countries. Now you have Switzerland that buys this electricity at a very low price and fills the dam, their dam. Switzerland has a lot of dams. They don't care really about the efficiency of this process because they bought the electricity very cheap. And in its turn, then, France, at some peaks, like during heat waves or extremely cold waves, when they have a large electricity consumption, they buy this same energy from Switzerland at an extremely high cost because France doesn't have any flexibility and doesn't have really a lot of storage solutions. So that's indeed an interesting like development. I'm reading the typical question, but how much do you think will PPA price decrease, or did we already achieve the lowest prices? Well, that's a good question. It already went really low, but the curve doesn't look like it's stopping. I would like to ask Frederick if he has a comment about that, because he's directly working on the energy market. So
yeah, sorry, Ounsi, I was muted.
yeah, no worries.
Well, I guess nobody knows how low these PPAs will go down. There is certainly still continuous improvement of the technologies that will bring down the PPAs, and new technologies like bifacial are definitely helping to reduce the LCOEs and therefore the PPAs. But yeah, I think there's also a little bit of speculation, to be honest, on the PPA prices, because the development market is very competitive. So people have to be low, maybe even lower than what they can construct the plants to win these markets. We've seen that, for instance, in India recently, where a lot of constructions have just been cancelled because the developers were bidding lower than they could actually construct the plants. So yeah, it's mostly market dynamics that will tell us whether the PPAs will go down or not.
And do you think there is a technological limit, or I don't know, is there is there any, I mean, there is necessarily at some point a physical limit, let's say?
I think there is a cost bottom line for the current technologies. Yes, the crystalline silicon, you have some limit on how cheap you can build this technology. But then you have all the advancements in technology, and even if for the same price you increase the watt peak, well, in dollar per watt, you are reducing the cost, and that's what counts at the end of the day. Or in kilowatt hour, dollar per kilowatt hour. So even if the same technology for the same price, you make it last longer, then you reduce the kilowatt hour price.
Okay, one more. Will the electricity market depend always on fossils? And is it possible in near future to have an electric grid that depends only on renewables? That's I guess the $1 million question. We'll talk about it in a minute. We'll take I guess we'll take a slide that is at the end of this talk to conclude and to discuss this point specifically. So if you allow me, I'll go now to the well, thank you for your thank you and thank you, Frederic, for your enlightenment as well. So I'll go further. Yeah, somebody asked about the longer program. So you will, after this, you will all receive an email, and we'll send you the link to see the program of the longer program and as well the registration form. Okay, so now this will be my shortest part about policies in general. There are a lot of legal aspects and a lot of discussions that can be held about financing, so I will not go too much in those. Just historically, public policies have mostly been done, have mostly been related to subsidizing. But there has been a lot of creativity, I have to say, in subsidies. So the first one and the most spread one is feed-in tariff, meaning that if you produce solar electricity on your roof or on your mid-scale installation, and you sell it to the national electricity grid, they have to buy it at a higher price than the consumer price. So then the price you actually buy it back. So whatever you produce, you actually feed it into the grid. And then there is the net metering that is the most widely spread, and special mention to Middle Eastern listeners. Net metering exists in Lebanon, exists in Jordan, exists in the UAE, exists in almost all the Arab countries. Yes, even the ones where electricity is not continuously supplied. So, and here what happens is that you feed into the grid what you produce and do not consume, and the National Electricity Grid Management or authorities give you a credit. So they don't buy it usually, they just acknowledge that you gave them X unit of electricity, and then you can buy for free or for the same price or in exchange electricity units. So this is really your meter counting negative when you produce more than you consume. And then you have more standard subsidies that are either at the manufacturing level or at the installation level. So either to the companies or to the consumer who is installing. You also have protective measures that have been used mostly by China and the United States in their commercial worlds, and that are, I have to say, a bit less efficient for this specific field than for other fields like agriculture or consumer goods production. Now, those are public policies. Nowadays, the most spread one is the second one, net metering. So it's actually not anymore really a subsidy, it's more a guarantee. Whatever you produce solar, we know that it's less bad for our environment, economy, and economy than the rest. Therefore, those are the kilowatt hours, the energy units that we will use first. Now, next to that, there are state-owned projects. And those are really now the big, I would say, de facto public policy actions that are happening. As we are in the UAE and Lebanon, we'll focus on those, but this applies to many other countries. The announcement of the world largest solar power plant is done, I think, every 6 months somewhere in the world. It happened in Morocco a couple of years ago. It happened in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi also consecutively in the past years, and actually several times. I'll explain why. So Noor Abu Dhabi was commissioned a year ago, and it's now under construction, partly connected, partly not, and is going to have 1.1 giga of production. This is really the main, I would say, the main public policy that is being followed in the Gulf countries. It's large, extremely large installations. Now, still, I want to mention on the right that malls, and really, it's becoming a trend. This is a Mall of the Emirates belonging to Majid Al Futtaim, a group that is a large that owns large quantities of malls and stores in the UAE. With whom we actually work, and who are building solar panels installing solar panels on the roof of most of their malls. Now, I have to say that there is some contradictions sometimes in those type of installations, because in this same mall there is a ski resort that is obviously consuming loads of energy for quite a small resort. So accompanying solar electricity installations, we advise, and I mean we as in really a large part of the solar community, to think about energy efficiency, because even though sunlight is unlimited, solar panels will even them find their limit at some point, and we cannot just think that we have unlimited and free energy, at least not in the coming 50 years. We'll see for later. So that's for the UAE. Now the right picture is more for the anecdote. The left one is really the big, the important investment that is being done by the state. So here you have Noor Abu Dhabi, a plant that is being built presently. I'm sorry, 50 kilometers far from Noor Abu Dhabi. You just go to the next emirate in the same country, in Dubai. You have the other biggest plant in the world. But of course, there's another subcategory that is being built as well. It's actually mostly built. So the solar photovoltaic panels are almost all there. They are approximately one giga of capacity. That's the equivalent of a nuclear reactor. And then they will add some other technologies next to them. So this is Hamad bin Rashid Al Maktoum Solar Park in Dubai. Another one, it's another technology this time, and this is a bit older and it's not really done anymore. It's concentrated solar power. So they are concentrating sunlight on a fluid that is approximately 10 years old, and that is in also the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, but further. So those are really large projects, and this is really the heavy investment that is being done in the past years. We are in a period where in the Middle East at this stage, it's not yet, I mean, it's becoming interesting to invest as a private entity in solar, but because of electricity subsidies that are still remaining, although they are decreasing really, really, really rapidly, but they are still remaining. So there is still debate if it's at the individual level, it's interesting or not. So there is no yes, no answer. But because states want to stop subsidizing electricity, they are heavily investing in renewables that are relatively cheap. Now, just for our audience in Lebanon, Lebanon can claim that it's doing well on solar because of a growth rate in terms of solar photovoltaic installation that is extremely high, more than 100% per year. However, because we never had in Lebanon the subsidies policy that allowed the sector to take off, and we don't have the large utility scale installations that allow the sector to suddenly increase by its capacity by a huge quantity in a year, we are still at extremely small quantities that are produced. 56 megawatts. This is approximately 56,000 microwave ovens that are fed by solar panel. It's not yet a lot. However, it is present. Okay, so again, my usual teaser for the advanced program. So we'll discuss about the global policies because there is a drive, although the international organizations often take decisions that are that are not compulsory. I mean, there's no coercive mechanism, but it's still a drive. Okay, so the climate meetings, the COPs, and the United Nations general directions, like the Sustainable Development Goals, still are incentives for the policies. And then we'll discuss specifically the case of the Arab world, as we are there, and we'll discuss also the China case, as it's really a giant in the field. We'll also do, I mean, it's not really public policies, but we'll discuss personal projects. I found it easy to put this here, but we'll discuss like personal projects. How can you finance them? How can you design them? Again, this is not really. We won't be able to do individual consultancies. We can do that later on, but the point is, we'll give you elements to start, and then you have ways. I mean, you choose. You want to work with local players or etc. So this brings me to my conclusion. I spoke about solar, and obviously we are big advocates of solar, but we do not claim at no point that solar will be the only energy source for the future. We believe in an energy mix. There are a lot of renewable energy sources. Those are some of them. Some of them are clean, some of them are not, by the way. But we are able to stand to support, to carry, let's say, to bear a certain quantity of pollution if we are thinking it rationally. So we believe in a cocktail, in a mix of energy sources, and we believe that this will be allowed, the integration of those sources will be allowed through smart grids, which is a concept that is developing now, and where consumption and production are mixed matched, or the consumption production means are mixed and matched to consumption. And when sometimes instead of having the consumer always drive the production, we might have the production drive the consumer and switch off your washing machine because there is not enough energy produced, and just switch it on 2 hours later. So really the production driving the consumption. And this, you might have seen this, it's often referred as one more industrial revolution. In every past industrial revolution, there have been a simultaneity of energy and communication revolution. And now this might be the latest one. So I want to thank you for your attention. This is my colleague Frederick next to the Masdar solar power plant in Abu Dhabi. Those are the key messages. Solar electricity is already and is going to be a major source of energy. Remember that the sun is actually our only source, but that can be indirect, and that PV cost is reducing continuously, but that its integration is something that is being worked on. So I would like to thank you for your attention. I finally ended up taking the whole hour and a half, but we discussed. So I have more time, so I'll stay for 10 more minutes, let's say, online. And we can discuss, even 15, actually even more. And we can discuss. I would like just to inform you or let you know that we run regular training activities, some free, some not, depending on the topic and the depth of the topic and the target audience. So you can follow us on the various social media. You can also send us an email at any moment. So you will receive a feedback form. I would love if you could tell me really personally how you found this. Very happy with the criticism, constructive always, but really, I mean, seriously, I would be very happy if you could tell me how useful this was. It should be more interactive. It was not a lot, I have to say, or not, it was very good like that, or we wanted to hear more about this, about that, etc. And we'll let you know about the longer, so the 3-session program in the same email where you will receive the request for giving your feedback. So I'm gonna read. Yes, thank you, Huda. You mentioned about the advanced session. Frederick, okay, I'm guessing I will not read what you wrote as you were responding. Pierre, is it technically conceivable to have a national grid based on small decentralized production of electricity? So, and then I'm reading thank you and thank you, and so thanks a lot to you for your attendance. And so meanwhile, you can ask questions on the chat or interrupt me, and I'll respond to Pierre. A national grid based on small decentralized production of electricity, yes, and 100 times yes, and not only yes, but it is desirable. So the more decentralized and the more local production is, this is a bit the concept of circular economy that brings resilience. So it is possible. That does not mean that we want islands of disconnected islands, energy islands. We do want a global interconnection, because a region can then feed a neighboring region depending on the production. So yes, now this if a grid is fully built on decentralized production of electricity, it actually needs to be monitored by a smart grid software, or by a smart or a smart grid concept, because there is really a need of continuous matching between the production and the consumption. And so here you have two levels. The first is you have a lot of electricity sources I'm sorry, that are producing intermittently, most of them, some of them continuously, if you could take dams, etc., geothermal. And so you will have a base load, and then you will have intermittent production in various regions, depending on the wind, on the sun, etc. So I'll come to that in a second, Frederick. So first point is to have interconnection between the various islands, because you might have a sudden deficit of production in a region that will be filled, or that will be compensated by imports from neighboring regions. Second, you need a smart grid, because you also might have, let's say, non-necessary sources of consumption switched on at a moment where there is not enough production, or where there is a general peak of consumption. And so the typical example really here is, you switch on your washing machine, you just leave and come back the next day, and it will have been actually on for a period decided by the production of the system. Now, added to that, because of a certain, in particular, because of the intermittence of a certain number of production means, we'll need a buffer so that the smart grid can, let's say, follow, or the system can actually match and adapt the production to the consumption. And this buffer has to be storage. Now, the bigger the buffer, the easier it is. So if your storage is made of like UPS, or small batteries, well, it's a very short storage that will simply be able to buffer the intermittence of the production. But if you have a large dam like the Swiss are doing, then you can actually comfortably loosen your control or your monitoring of the consumption. We'll talk about that in the discussion about the technologies, the technological session in the advanced session. But I have to say, we'll touch upon smart grids and storage. But if people are interested in going deeper, it is worth doing a specific session on it. So we would need to discuss it. But otherwise, we'll talk about it in the technology parts. Okay, so well, I see a number of people left. That means that it's even easier to discuss if of interest, and that means also that it's a good moment to slowly conclude. Do you have any other question? Does anyone have a remark? Is there anything you would like to mention? So yeah, thanks to you, Pierre. Okay, so thank you everybody for the thank yous. Thank you for attending. I'm really looking forward to your feedback, please, and fill the last. There's always the last question in the feedback. So what else do you want to tell us? Please fill it. And you'll hear from us. So you registered to this, so we have your email, and we'll send you the ads for the next sessions about solar, and also for the next sessions in general about. So we'll talk about green buildings very soon. Okay, if no other question, I mean, I'll wait a bit more, but if no other question, let's say within 30 seconds, I'll switch off. And again, I thank you very much for attending.
One question.
Yes, please go ahead.
What's your opinion on bifacial?
From which point of view? So what is like, what do you have in mind exactly?
Does it have bring more commercial benefit, or it is merely hype, or if you have
So I'll give you a couple of elements, and then if Frederick, you are still here, I would love that you
yeah, I'm here. I can answer as well if you want.
Then go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, bifacial is one of the next. It's one of the next thing which is happening right now. And when I say next, it's actually already in transition, and it's going to happen. It is going to take over a substantial part of the utility scale, and the reason is that so when you're designing a project, there's you have a number of assumptions. One of them is the efficiency of the module, but another one is the resource, so the amount of light that you have, and that is as Ounsi mentioned, is pretty linear across the globe. And with bifacial, when you look at it from a technology point of view, you realize that in fact what it does not increase so much the efficiency, but it does increase the resource, because all of a sudden you have let's say 10-15% of more light which is coming to the rear of the modules. So it's actually a button that is very difficult to tune, if not with bifacial. You cannot change the amount of sunlight that you receive, but with bifacial, actually what you are doing is increasing the resource. So yes, it is going to take over a significant part of the utility scale market, and we see that's already happening.
Sorry, Frederick. So you say that bifacial being some collateral benefits?
Yes.
It has some benefits. Yes, absolutely. It has some significant benefits. I've seen everything between 5% to, okay, I've seen crazy numbers like 20%, which I actually don't believe, but between 5% and let's say 11-12% of increased power. I think this is the reality in most bifacial systems. And then of course it depends on the additional price that you have to pay to get the bifacial technology in. The construction part is more difficult because it's more difficult to design and to design properly. You have to take also care of how the O&M is going to happen. Cleaning the rear and these kind of things. Taking the cables, the cable management is also an issue. Simply dimension, because you're going to have during the peak, you're going to have much more power, and in fact much more current going through. So you may be limiting by the current in some cases. But overall, yeah, it's a winning technology. I think it has some advantages, and it will be a big success commercially.
Thank you. The matter of point, with all manufacturers generate some mental fog, and in this conference you have several coming out, so it really helps.
Yeah,
and that's good.
It is. Merci.
Merci to you. Thank you, Frederick. Any other question, comment, requests? And if not, thanks a lot for those who are still here, and thanks to the others as well, but they cannot hear. And so looking forward, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.